Welcome to Lifestyles at the Not Jet Set, the show that treats travel and tourism like a meal to be savored, not like cheap calories to be gobbled through. Often on this show, we visit little byways, places that don't get much attention but deserve more than they currently get. Today, as you can see, I'm in Central Park in New York City, which is really in the heart of the world. Lin-Manuel Miranda, who has 2 hit Broadway shows set in this fine city, calls New York City the greatest city in the world. In fact, pretty much everybody calls New York City the greatest city in the world, so perhaps that's not so novel. New York City is so overwhelming that it's not possible for anybody to have a comprehensive or an authoritative view of what to see. Everybody brings their own perspective. You can tell sometimes that I feel a certain sense of insecurity at being a non-flyer because I fear that I'll be thought provincial or left out. But New York City, nobody can feel that anything has to do with the word provincial. So for our own idiosyncratic weekend in New York City, here's how it went. We caught the bus from our inner suburb of Boston. We didn't even have to go into the big bus station in Boston. There was a direct bus from the western suburbs, and we arrived in Manhattan near Penn Station, which has been renovated, and caught the nice city bikes and rode them up the Hudson River along the bike path there with good views of the river that has such an important role in American history, providing the entryway to the continent in the years just after the steamship was invented. As we went up, we went past the George Washington Bridge, past the neighborhood of Washington Heights, visited the cloisters. It was a terrific collection of medieval art and architectural elements. It reminded me of monasteries that we saw while on pilgrimage in Spain, which was our last time there. One of the nice things about recording an episode in New York City is that everybody in New York City ignores people who are talking to themselves. It's part of the tradition here, and so it's less embarrassing than it might otherwise be to be talking to my selfie on a camera. So then we went and had a fine dinner yesterday evening at La Floridita restaurant in Washington Heights. We love the Lin-Manuel musical set there. For the itinerary today, I will walk in a minute to the 11 a.m. service at St. Thomas Episcopal Church, which is noted for both its architecture and for being host to a famous men and boys choir. The guest speaker today is the Right Reverend Dame Sarah Mullally, who's Bishop of London, and will be speaking about the important issues of the day. As somebody who doesn't fly myself, I enjoy taking advantage of the greenhouse gas emissions that others have already committed through their travel in order to stay connected to what's going on in the world at large. After that, my spouse and I will have a meal at an Indian restaurant at Lexington and 28th and work our way south again by divvy bike to the Tenement Museum, where we'll be going on a tour at 2:30 p.m. which has to do with the history of women and activism set in 1902 in New York City. The women at the time concerned about high food prices, and you could tell how interesting this is for somebody whose own area of academic study is the economics of food and nutrition. The women organized a protest, especially against kosher meat producers who they felt were charging prices that were excessive. After that, we'll meet my cousins for a meal at a picnic here back again in Central Park. And my cousins and I share grandparents who were siblings of each other. And this grandfather of mine grew up in a little village near the city of Zhytomyr in Ukraine. And this is much on our mind because the news of the day includes the terrible war, and we're remembering the history throughout the 20th century and up to the present time of war and dislocation that influenced even our own family. My grandfather fled in the 1920s by ship and settled first in Canada and then in the United States, and the cousins and I will be going over a diary that my grandmother kept from the time of reunion between these cousins, grandparents, and my own on a trip back to Russia in 1970 when the Soviet Union was opening up for travel for the first time in a long time. Today, we're not the only people traveling by bike in New York City. It's the 5-borough bike ride, which during the pandemic I think was delayed, and so people are enjoying being back at it. Lin-Manuel Miranda describes New York City as being in a constant state of metamorphosis. He says you could walk from the top of Manhattan to the bottom and then back again. And by the time of your return walk, whole blocks would have changed in character. I find it to be a privilege to be able to visit New York City. But how many people are able to enjoy this privilege without flying? Within just a 4-hour overland travel from Boston or from DC by train or by bus or by automobile with several people in the automobile, you can reach New York City. But for people in other parts of the world, ask your own self, what is within 4 hours travel of you that represents great cosmopolitan connection to the world and its history, that could require weeks and weeks, more time than you could possibly commit, in order to enjoy it in full, just like is the case with New York City. I hope you find inspiration in the potential for your own travels without using jet fuel, that preserve the spirit of what's important and value in the traveling lifestyle.